Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host with the most, Phil Better, and today we're joined by an extraordinary guest who has made a remarkable impact in the business world from Northeast to Southeast. Our guest today is a beacon of leadership and innovation across a vast spectrum of business communities, from Philadelphia to New York City and down to DC, to the vibrant regions of Greater Atlanta and Charleston, South Carolina. Her influence extends from small and mid-sized businesses to the ranks of Fortune 1000, providing strategic insight that drives sustainable growth and revenue. As the CEO of Junction Creative, an award-winning strategic agency, she masterfully blends the rigorous analytic approach of business consulting firm with the dynamic creativity of an advertising agency. Under her visionary leadership, Junction Creative has partnered with over 450 companies, crafting robust strategies that fuel long-term success. Her innate ability to connect and inspire makes her not just a respectable leader, but one of the most instantly likable personalities in the industry. And she's amazingly likable. Like, oh my God, we met 5 minutes ago. I'm already in love with her. In today's episode, she will share her invaluable expertise on building revenue generating strategies, the art of combining business acumen with creative execution, and the secrets behind her consulting success. This is an episode you won't want to miss, filled with actionable insight and powerful lessons for entrepreneurs and business leaders alike. So please join me in welcoming the phenomenal Julie Gareleck to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was stressed the whole way down. I'm like, I know the name's coming, practicing it in my head. Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm excited because, like, you've worked with over 450 companies. You've written a book, Dare to Become.
Yes.
You are a shining light for entrepreneurs in the world, and I'm so excited to have you here. So we're going to jump into it. What made you decide to be an entrepreneur? What was the catalyst that made Julie the amazing entrepreneur she is today?
Yeah. So I tell people my story is probably a little different than most. So, growing up, I wanted to be a journalist, thought I would go down the route of writing stories my entire life for newspapers, which now we no longer hold.
No.
But, my experience working for my parents who were small business entrepreneurs, I really got a taste for, one, what it was like to run a business, and two, really what it provided to them. And so as I started my corporate career, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do or what type of business I wanted to start. And through some experiences that I had working for other companies, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for this, but I quit my job and started my business the very next day. So not a traditional path for sure.
So you were in the corporate world and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, this is not for me.
Yeah.
You grew up in an entrepreneurial household with your parents. So obviously you had that flavor of entrepreneur before most people generally do. When you quit, did you feel like you were getting freedom, or were you like, I'm doing something insane?
I think, my experience working for other companies was certainly invaluable, right? So I learned a lot of really great lessons, but I really dealt with a lot of challenging environments and some difficult personalities. And when I did quit my job, I had some resolution to the fact that I was ready to invest in myself. Because, after having survived some of those environments and having to, fight through some of those challenges, I realized that if what I love to do is something that I also happen to be really good at, then it's time for me to actually invest in myself and really take the leap to do it on my own terms. And so that's really what the fuel was. And certainly it was very scary. And certainly I was not planning on quitting my job the day that I did. But I do feel like that was the catalyst where I had felt a certain way for a long period of time and really wanted to be the change. I wanted to create a company that changed the culture, that changed our approach. And that's what I did when I built Junction Creative.
So when you decided to create Junction Creative, um, what was your initial thought process? Because obviously, like most businesses, there's an we evolve from, oh, we just offered this, and then all of a sudden we're over here and we're doing completely different things. With Creative Junction, when you started, did you have a set plan what you wanted to stay in, or have you evolved since the initial idea?
Yeah, I mean, great questions, right? So when in my previous role, I was working as a strategist at an interactive ad agency, and I was able to work with really large clients on strategies around how they were approaching what they used to call interactive, which is now digital. That's how old I am, okay? But
We don't talk about
but
that.
yeah, exactly. But I really saw a gap between the business thinking and then what actually got executed from a creative standpoint. And in around 2008, 2009, this was really before marketing was results driven, right? We knew that creative could generate a buzz. Like everyone watched for the Super Bowl commercials to see which one was the most popular. But as digital started, and I'd like to think that I've grown up with digital, which is as it started, I really wanted to be able to work with clients to say, hey, what are your business goals and objectives, right? Because spending money on digital isn't just about brand awareness. It's not just about clicks. It's about driving revenue. And so that was the idea behind like when I founded Junction, was really to be that connection between strategy and the execution. And I will say over the years, our client portfolio has evolved. Certainly around 2009, obviously that was at the bottom of the market. So we were dealing with a lot of people that needed more strategy than execution. But then as they started to come out of those times, we saw a lot more execution than we did strategy. So from an evolution standpoint, I would say we still at our core have the same approach to how we do it, but we definitely offer a lot more services than we did when we first started.
I love that. And when you first started, obviously, like most entrepreneurs, you were probably a solopreneur wearing all the hats and all the gloves and all the outfits.
Yep.
When was it that you hired your first full-time employee? You probably had some VAs and you probably still have VAs. When was it that you hired your first full-time, be it a virtual assistant that you took on full-time or an actual, North American employee, the typical full-time worker?
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to say I've never actually hired a VA.
Oh,
But I will say, it's definitely something I'm looking at now. But when I started my business, it was definitely for that first year, it was me, right? I was doing the sales calls, I was creating the presentations, I was doing the work. And around, I would say I had closed probably 3 or 4 clients, not a lot of revenue, right? I mean, it was really not a lot. Didn't even replace my salary from before I started. But around that 12-month mark, I started to work with some partners. They were sending work my way. And at 18 months, I was fortunate enough to get introduced to Yahoo, which is a client and customer we all know. And literally, it transformed my business from just me to just under 15 people in 90 days. So I literally, I had a full-time contractor that was helping me with process and operations, and then we just started adding people from there. So I really did go from it just being me to being me and a lot of other people.
fairly quickly. 90 days is a very fast.
It was crazy. Yeah, from
Crazy.
the 18-month mark.
Yeah,
So once the client came on, but yes, no, it was crazy. I don't know if I could do that again, but maybe I could.
at least you were able to get it done, and that's
Mhm.
that's a that's a sizable bump
Yes.
of staff. Most people go 15 people over a year. You had to do it in 90 days.
Yes.
Um, with those people who did join you initially, do you still have some of them still working with you, and have their their roles evolve since their first roles when they first joined?
Yeah, no, I'm very fortunate. I do actually have 2 folks that have been with me, really since the beginning. One is our head of creative. She's amazing, Allie. She's been with us since day 1, and she's really evolved too because when she started for us, it was right after school for her. So she now leads the creative, leads the creative vision for our clients. So, she's evolved in that same capacity, and then certainly Marcy's also worked with us since day 1. She was actually the first full-time person I hired to help me with operations. And what's interesting is she started out really as our director of operations. And then over the years, she too decided to go down an entrepreneurial path for a number of years. And then now has come back to work with us as a senior developer. So she's still engaged, although in a different capacity, she's still very active with the company.
I love that. I love that you have some employees that you've helped evolve and change themselves. They've tried the entrepreneurial path. Maybe they'll return to it. Maybe they won't. But they at least they have that taste and they know they have the support from you.
Yeah.
When you did get that mode and become less of an entrepreneur and more into the CEO role, because
Mhm.
that's what happens when you start hiring people. You start losing the
Yes.
entrepreneurial, you become the
Yes.
CEO.
Yeah.
Um, what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because most of us don't know what the role of a CEO is, because we think as an entrepreneur, we're the CEO, when in
Mhm.
actuality, we're everything but a CEO.
Yeah. No, but
um,
you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's like the true statement. I mean, even today, 15 years later, I still take the trash out. I still do office orders if we need it, if we run out of something. I think the perception of a CEO in the marketplace is that you're in charge and the buck stops with you, and it's this exciting, glamorous path. When you're the CEO, the buck stops with you. So you carry the responsibility and accountability of the entire organization, and it shifts and it changes. So I think I'm still learning. I'm still growing as well as we, add clients and add people. It's ever evolving in terms of what my role looks like. And again, at the end of the day, I still empty the trash. So if I
you're
could
still
just get
keeping
rid
that
of that, but
entrepreneurial. You're getting that you're like, I'm still an entrepreneur. I still have to do some tasks around the office. I'm not a CEO.
yeah.
Um, and I love that you're still involved in the day-to-day of the
Yeah.
company. You're still like, hey, I'm like everybody else. You're showing that the CEO is still just a regular person. And I love that because it creates a more bonded team when the CEO
Mhm.
is actively involved in helping the company instead of being like, okay, this is the process I need you to do. Okay, bye, and go off on their yacht or their
Yeah.
golf retreat and that. So I love that you're changing the role of a CEO on a small part, but you're helping people. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think you have to, right? I mean, when I worked for my parents, when I was a teenager, I watched how they built a team of people. I mean, they invested in a restaurant, which was not what they did, right? My dad was in corporate America. My mother worked in the banking industry. And then one day they bought a restaurant. And what I watched and learned working for them was that their rule was that if they were going to be in charge, then they needed to understand everyone's role within the organization. So whether that was washing dishes, peeling potatoes, being a sous chef, running the floor, it was really important that the team understood that when they were asking, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z in this amount of time, it's not because they were being demanding. It's because they knew that that's what was possible. And so I've adopted a similar methodology here, which is that, I've done in some capacity each of the roles here. And if I haven't, I spend time learning it so that when we do bring people in, I'm not just talking down, but also saying, hey, from our experience, here's what works best in this role. So I do think it's actually made it more effective for me too, just to understand also where the employees are, right? Like, they don't have necessarily 25 years of experience. So I have to remember kind of where they are and help them grow in those roles by doing, right? So understanding what they do every day.
I love that. And it shows loyalty, not only it shows a different sense of loyalty. And like if I saw the CEO doing everyday tasks and mentioning like, oh, I did it this way, maybe that can help, I would be more loyal to a company that way, because I
Yeah.
feel like, okay, this person, this CEO, this company, this organization is invested in us to take it to the next level. And I want to talk about investing, because you
Yeah.
obviously have invested a lot in yourself.
Yes.
And it's still ongoing, and you invest in your staff, as you mentioned, you do the work that they do. How do you keep your staff motivated to invest in themselves, to upskill their career inside your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple of different things, right? So I think one of the things that I commit to folks when they come on is that, we have an environment here where I joke, and all my employees will tell you, I always liken our environment to Home Goods. If you've ever gone there for like furniture that looks kind of chic and also comfortable. But I say that because the environment is definitely very welcoming, and it is very much like you are. You're disarmed when you come in, right? There are couches everywhere. Everyone has their own office space. They're not in cubicles. They all have their own dedicated space. But I really do have a culture where we get to work on time and we leave on time. And so I do that because they need to have time after work to go be whoever they are, right? So whether that's with family or friends. And so it's kind of great. We do all get in on the same time, although sometimes I work from home for an hour, but and then come into the office. But we do all leave at the same time. And I actually commit myself to leaving with them as well, because it's a really healthy boundary that we've set. So I feel like having a culture where that's an acceptable practice, we're not sitting here looking at our watch going, oh my gosh, they left right at 5. No, if you're not leaving at 5, then something's wrong, right? We either have too much work or you're getting stuck. And then the other things that some of our new leaders within the organization are doing is we're providing more training and education for those folks that are coming into us new to the industry, making sure that they have resources available to get certifications, to learn more. And the other thing that we also do here too is that when folks start, they don't sort of sit in their office for a year before they can engage with clients. We bring them in day one. We want them to see and hear and audit, what we're doing and how those client conversations are going, because I do think that you grow faster that way, as opposed to just sitting back and waiting for that day to come. I know that's how I felt in my earlier career, which was kind of in a box for a while until I checked a box and they said, okay, now you can. So we really do try to throw them into those client projects early on so they get real hands-on experience.
I love that little bit. They get the hands-on experience right at the start. They
Yep.
someone's holding their hands. They're like, yeah, come watch us
Yep.
how we do it, and learn as you go, instead of, like you said, have to wait a year and on edge, not knowing what to do. So I love
Yeah.
how you're like, you're automatically part of this team. We're going into it, and I like the fact that everybody leaves at the same time. There's nobody going, oh, I'm going to stay an extra hour to look like I'm snobbing up to the boss. You're like,
Right.
no, we're all leaving. Like, I'm not
We're all
staying.
leaving.
I ain't
I'm out
staying.
at
You ain't
5. Yeah.
staying. You're like, 5 o'clock's. I'm out of here. And obviously, the bonus of being a boss, you can come in a little later.
Yeah.
But I like how you try to show up at the same time as everybody else, to be like, hey, we're a family, we're a team. We work together. We leave together.
Yep.
And you give them that opportunity to have a life outside that work-life
Yeah.
balance, which
Yes, it's
is
important.
so important. I think a lot more important than when we were going through the corporate world, where life balance wasn't so important.
No,
And it was
not at all.
work, 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 so that you could get into the big times.
Yeah.
And I love how you're slowly changing the culture. You're creating the culture that is more acceptable. That's amazing, and it's a great thing to put out there in the world, and more businesses should do. Um, with doing that, I'm interested. Do
Mhm.
you find some of your clients being like, wait, you're not in the office at 10 o'clock. I need you at the office at 10 o'clock.
No, so funny thing, right? So first 6 years I was in business, I was available 24/7. If a client texted me at 11, I answered it. If the team was working on a development project until midnight, I was up with them. And when I was 6 years into the business, was so fortunate enough to have had twin girls. So I had to learn how to be a mom and a CEO and a business owner and a wife and all that comes with that. And I realized that being available 24/7 really wasn't sustainable for a couple of reasons. One, I think we all need a break at 5 o'clock because we've worked all day. And if you're doing your job, you're working hard, right? So the other thing I realized is that every text or email that came after 8 p.m. was never good. It was highly charged or motivated by whatever mindset that person was in. And so by the next morning, it was a lot of apologies. I'm sorry, I reacted, right? And so I found that there wasn't really a lot of productive conversations going on. And so with our clients, we do tell them, hey, our offices are open from 8 to 5. If we're servicing a client 24/7 for like a web maintenance, they can always, reach out to their tech team, right, to address any major issues. But I have to be honest with you, our clients never push back. And I realized it over time that those first 6 years I was hazing myself and I was making myself available, but I wasn't being as productive as I could have been. And I think also too, when you are communicative with your clients and you set those boundaries, they will respect them, right? Because they themselves have boundaries. But it's definitely evolved, right? I think 15 years ago, everybody was working 24 hours a day, but I think slowly culture has shifted in the business communities as well. So that's helped keep those boundaries where they are.
I love that. I love how you set down those boundaries because a lot of entrepreneurs fail to set those boundaries and then get those clients that are somewhat problematic. That
Yeah.
always that give you 80% of your problems and only 20% of the revenue that comes with
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that and I worked for some of those companies where I was on call essentially until 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. And then if I didn't respond the next day, there was anger, right? Because I didn't see the email. And it's just it sets you up unfairly for an expectation that isn't set. I think if employers set the expectation, hey, you're available 24/7, this is what this job is, that's different. But a lot of times they sell you the sizzle of like, oh, here's how cool it is. We have ping pong. We do happy hour on Fridays. But oh, by the way, when I text you at midnight, if you don't text back, I'm going to get angry. Right. So that's why I feel like setting those boundaries and sticking to them is incredibly important.
I want to transition because you've had a great career. You have an amazing business. Obviously, your employees love you since you have two that have stuck around for nearly the whole time. What made the decision to transfer into becoming an author and writing Dare to Become? Like that's like putting on
Yeah.
another hat. Like it's going from
Yeah.
CEO stress to, oh my God, I have to deliver in a book.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I can tell you what I was thinking. So, I mean, anyone that's ever met me or known me knows that I've always joked, hey, one day I should write a book about this, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you see all kinds of things, right? You learn all from different people, different industries. But I didn't really know what I wanted to write about. And there were many times I would sit down at the computer and say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write this book by the time I'm 40. Well, I didn't write it until I was 44. So clearly I was behind schedule. But really, what happened was we had celebrated our 13th year in business and we'd achieved some milestones that I had set for us. And they were aggressive, but we were able to achieve them. I was very excited. But it caught me in a moment of, oh my gosh, well then what's next? Like I was so focused on the goal that I didn't even think forward to say, well, okay, if we actually hit these goals, what comes behind that? And so I was sort of struggling for inspiration and looking to other books to read. And there are so many business books out there that tell you about how you can generate a six-figure business overnight and how you can grow a $1 billion business. But I didn't really find something that spoke to me to say, just keep going. Like you got this. Like it. And so I really started going through journals that I had written from the time I was 13 until now. And I was reading these stories from when I was in my 20s working for another company, and I was reading it going, holy cow, like, who is this girl? Like, she was fearless. She was unafraid. I pushed my way through, and it just reminded me of how far I had come. And I realized that as an entrepreneur, we put so much pressure on ourselves to do more, be more, give more, that we don't ever take a step back and go, you know what? Like, you're doing a great job. Like, here's where we're at. So I wrote Dare to Become from the corner booth to the corner office, and it talks about my journey working for my parents' restaurant when I was 16, what it taught me, and how I applied a lot of the lessons that I learned from my parents to be successful in my own career. And so some of the stories are funny, some of them are very raw. But overall, it's just meant to be an inspirational book to let business owners, not just the billion-dollar business owners, but the everyday business owner, the small business entrepreneur, the solopreneur, the person who's thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, that they can do it. But hey, here's what you need to know in order to be more successful at it.
I love it. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's I haven't eaten yet, so my
Yeah.
I'm getting a little hangry, if you will, or a little tired.
Yeah.
With everything that you have going on,
Mhm.
you're doing crazy things. You have your book. You're
Yeah.
celebrating. Where are we going in 10 years? Like, if I snap my fingers, we're 10 years in the future, Julie.
Oh.
Where are we? What are you doing? What is Creative Junction? Are you writing more books? What is Julie doing and all the fun stuff?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you'd have asked me 15 years ago if Junction would still be alive and kicking here at 15 years, I couldn't have told you it would, but we have been. And I fully see Junction Creative moving forward. We're going to have to adapt, right? As AI pushes our industry, we're going to have to continue to evolve. And on sort of the other side, I've always felt that, I've always learned from people that have come before me that have built careers. I've listened and learned to all of the people that are around me. And so, my goal with the book, with Dare to Become, is to continue to inspire people, and continue to potentially write more books that aren't just about business, but how to succeed in life and relationships. And because I do think that we have to get back to the fundamentals in order for us all to grow. So I want to keep, consulting with people and helping move organizations forward.
I like that. That's great. Um, I would love to get a piece of advice. So either for business owners, entrepreneurs, on how they can start the process of growing their revenue, or something in that line, shifting their perspective so that they're more organized when it comes to it, or how they can invest in themselves to become a better leader or a better entrepreneur. It's a piece of advice from you, so you can choose which side you want to go on. Give both, give one or other. It's really up to you. I would love to hear from you a piece of advice for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are someone who is thinking about starting a business or taking the first step to invest in yourself, I would say to be mindful that it is going to be much harder than you could ever possibly imagine. The highs will be so high, the lows will be very, very low. But if you have a plan and you are executing against that plan and you are moving it forward, just know that eventually things will start to click in place, things will start to happen. And but just continue to have a plan. You can't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to build the next Uber, or I'm going to build the next Lyft, right? You have to really put down on paper what it is that you want to do. What do you want to sell? Is it a product? Is it a service? And how are you going to go get those customers? And I think by starting with a plan and just continuing to execute against it, even if it's small incremental steps, that's where you need to start. I would also say to people who maybe are looking for inspiration throughout the journey, maybe they've been challenged with, revenue loss or stagnation with revenue growth. I always like to tell folks that when we're challenged or when we are struggling, that is typically when we grow the most. And that's when we become the best version of ourselves as entrepreneurs and as leaders. So, the highs are great, But I will tell you that as a leader and as an entrepreneur, you will learn so much more from those challenges, and it will make you a better leader over time.
Great piece of advice. We are coming to the end of the episode, which I hate because Julie, you're amazing. You're dropping more value than I think I've heard today. But I want to go back to 10-year-old Julie because she's standing right beside me. She's an amazing person. She doesn't stop talking, which I love because she's telling me a whole bunch of fun stories.
That's
about her
probably
life.
true when I was 10.
But Julie, I would love to know if you could pass back one piece of advice to your 10-year-old self, what would it be?
Such a hard question. I don't even know if I remember when I was 10, but I think I do. I know at that age, you're so focused on what's coming next. I would say to my 10-year-old self, enjoy the ride. I think I spent a lot of years focused on what's coming next. Am I going to get there? When's it coming? When I do this, when I do that, just enjoy the ride, right? Just every moment, whether it's a good one or a bad one, it's all part of your path. It's all part of your journey, and do your best to enjoy it.
I love that. I love that piece of advice. It's great. Just enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride.
It's a great ride to be on, the ups and downs that comes along with it. So Julie, thank you very much. I'm going to enjoy putting that into myself and enjoying the ride now, because we have to do that as entrepreneurs. We have to enjoy. We get so muddled into the day-to-day that we forget that this is a journey that we're going on, and it's a fun ride and an adventure, and not too dangerous like going to Mordor to destroy a ring. Like it's a little safer than that.
Could be worse. Yeah.
Could be worse. Julie, I'm going to jump off stage here. So I want you to tell my audience where they can connect with you if they're enjoyed what they're saying. Maybe you can help them be a mentor, or where they can get the book Dare to Become. So the floor, ma'am, is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, feel free to find us at www.juliecroppgareleck.com or www.junction-creative.com. You can find us on social media. And as always, you can reach me at julie@juliecroppgareleck.com.
Excellent, Julie. Thank you so much for being a guest here. I had so much fun talking with you and learning about your story, how you were an entrepreneur pretty much from birth, if you will. But you went from the booth to the corner office, and I've had so much fun having you on the podcast.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. This has been a joy. I really appreciate it. And I love all of the great stories that you've shared with your audience. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. To my audience, make sure you check out the show notes down below, because that's where you're going to connect with Julie and see where Creative Junction can help you, and also a link to the book so you can get that book and dare to become the best version of yourself. And I want to thank Julie again, you for listening. And remember always, always to invest in yourself.